Data Privacy Notice. De La Salle College of St. Benilde, or DLSCSB, respects your right to privacy and is committed to protect the confidentiality of your personal information, thus has adapted necessary organizational, technical, and physical measures to secure it. Data Privacy Notice. De La Salle College of St. Benilde, or DLSCSB, respects your right to privacy and is committed to protect the confidentiality of your personal information, thus has adapted necessary organizational, technical, and physical measures to secure it. DLSCSB is bound to comply with the Data Privacy Act of 2012, or RA 10173, its implementing rules and regulations, and relevant issuances of the National Privacy Commission. By participating in this video meeting, conference, or webinar, you are consenting to our collection and use of information, including recording, in accordance with this privacy notice. Information is also processed via video conferencing platform Zoom. Please refer to their privacy policy at the website. The information processed, such as name, email address, your image, video, and audio, will be used for attendance, documentation, communication, and systems administration purposes by authorized individuals of department, office, or unit organizing the event, and other offices authorized to have access. We also use the information gathered from you for abuse prevention and privacy protection. DLSCSB shall only retain the said personal information until it serves its purpose, after which it shall be securely disposed of. Queries and complaints can be directed to the Data Protection Officer via email at dpo@benilde.edu.ph.
Let us remember that we are in the holy presence of God. In the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Together, our Lasallian prayer. I will continue, my God, to do all my actions for the love of you. Our Lady of the Star, pray for us. Saint John Baptist de La Salle, pray for us. Saint Benilde Romanson,
Pray for us.
pray for us. Leave Jesus in our hearts forever. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. So again, welcome to our webinar. I would like to acknowledge first some faculties who attended here today. So we have Sir Elwin, Sir Cesar Concho, or Sir Aldous, our tech team, Dodd, and then, of course, Sir Harvey. Yun. So good afternoon po. Now, let's, for our welcoming remarks, may I call on Architect Harvey Vasquez, our chairperson for Architecture Program. Sir Harvey.
Thank you, Ms. Erica. So good afternoon, everyone. It's with pleasure to welcome Sudar and hopefully Alex in a while. We have been in talks with them since last year, and this is actually in line with our recent what we're trying to promote in terms of the practice of architecture, a more collaborative architecture, an architecture wherein the community is more involved. And I think we all see that importance during what we all experienced in the pandemic, wherein the previous notion and process of architecture is proven to be not of value for us as a community. So this kind of changing of guards, changing of the processes, and in terms of not wholly wholly dropping the previous process, but somehow finding new means of expressions in on architecture, and this is following the previous webinar from Philippines, a non-profit organization that also fosters a collaborative approach in design, looking at users that are in the margins. So the process And we see also the value in this new form of architectural collaboration that Sudar and Alex has been fostering in this past few years, being not always in the same space and still being able to collaborate on certain projects, are something that we feel is the future of our practice. So as mentioned in some of our webinars in professional practice, nowadays the scale of an office is more flexible. It's not about how many staff you have in your office to sort of ensure the success of your firm, but it's more about a collaborative process that somehow, in some cases, you can collaborate with different offices. So this is something that we feel like we are excited in this new direction, and we hope in this webinar and also in the Q&A, we will be able to discuss that further. So thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, and hopefully everyone had a hearty lunch. And also, if you are feeling sleepy, grab a coffee, because this would be an exciting webinar for this afternoon. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Sir Harvey. Now we move on to introducing our guest speakers. Okay, so Alexander Eriksson Furunesl and Sudarshan V. Khadka Jr. run a shared architectural practice rooted in principles of collaboration and mutual support. Khadka was an associate of LV Locsin Partners and co-curated the Philippine Pavilion at the Venice Biennale 2016. Furunesl studied at AA School of Architecture before getting his degree at NTNU, Norway, where he is currently doing an artistic PhD titled Learning from Bayanihan or Dugnad. Through projects in Brazil, China, India, Norway, Philippines, and Vietnam, they explore critical construction as a means to express shared meanings through architecture. Khadka and Furunesl are the curators and architects of the Philippine Pavilion for the 2021 Venice Architecture Biennale entitled Structures of Mutual Support. So ladies and gentlemen, let's give a virtual applause to Sudar and Alex.
Hi, hello. Thank you for the very, very warm welcome. Alex is also here with us today in spirit at the moment because there is some, things at home that he has to deal with, but he will be with us for the question and answer, but we will be here to present to you the work that we've been doing for the past, I don't know, since maybe 2013, so around 9 years already that we've been working together. And this is sort of trying to share with you the process and the theories by which we try to frame the projects that we work on, because it's really important that we all get a better understanding of how we as architects could play a role in this process of creation and process of creating space together and creating places that mean something to the communities that inhabit them.
Okay, so Sir Altius.
What we thought we'd do today is to share with you some ideas of how we understand and practice architecture. But to do that, we also need to talk about society, or the way that we understand the situation that we find ourselves in, and how we choose to question it. We believe our built environment is a direct result of the values and understandings that shape our society. So if we are to question the way that we build, we also need to question the way that we live. On a global scale, the way we live together now has proven unsustainable, both socially and environmentally. As a paradigm of economic growth spread across the globe, productivity and efficiency of the market became prioritized over other social and environmental values. Within this paradigm, collective and individual values are understood separately. Competition instead of co-survival leads to progress, and civilization equals departure from nature. Something is wrong with the way that we live together when people feel distanced from their own surroundings, when construction is primarily for speculation and profit-making, when buildings are mere products to be bought and sold, when resources are scarce due to over-extraction, and when laborers are exploited.
Today's environmental and social challenges need to be addressed as interconnected problems. And in our practice, we explore how traditions of mutual support could offer an alternative understanding of how we have lived together. So most cultures around the world have forms of mutual support, whether it's called bayanihan or dugnat, doikong, mujiao, or even sogofujo, or how to say it in Japanese. So that these traditions are not defined by any specific task, organization, or purpose. Instead, it provides a way of organizing and working together to fulfill a purpose collectively defined by those that practice it. In the absence of government support, for example, it functions as a form of community welfare. During calamities, it provides safety nets as a means for recovery. In agriculture, it enables farmers to secure needed labor for harvesting. It has enabled communities to build with the materials available and allow the members of the community to help with the construction. Over time, the operation and maintenance of buildings relied on the ability to sustain these environmental and social resources too. Moreover, food and celebration are also part of the process of building because they strengthen the social ties and the materials used will be replenished years or sometimes generations in advance. Knowledge and craft are passed on to generations in the form of stories and collective work, creating conditions for deliberative process necessary to question how we live together.
Through mutual support, we can approach architecture as a process rather than a static object. This is a process where everyone contributes, from developing shared ideas on what is needed and how to realize those ideas, to the actual making and living with what has been built. It is a process of mutualism where an architect is one of many contributors, and critically, the agencies of those who give meaning to the built environment become central to the entire process. In this context, it becomes necessary to change the question from what architecture is to what architecture does over time. Such an approach requires us to discuss the impact of a building beyond its completion, where every decision made in the process of creating a building influences the outcome. And we believe mutual support offers a platform to make these decisions together. So if we build through a process of mutual support, what outcomes can we expect beyond the built output itself? Hans Schotte, our mentor, proposed 3 attributes to consider the outcome of a built object. Firstly, the material quality of building reflects the capacity to sustain and transform its physical and functional features over time. Secondly, the symbolic quality of a building derives from people's relationship to it. A building can be seen as an embodiment of the stories and meanings carried by those who relate to it. Thirdly, the strategic quality is represented in how a building affects its surrounding environment in the long run.
Historically, the disaster-prone conditions of the Philippines have necessitated a means of cooperation and sharing of risks through mutual support. The Filipino tradition of mutual support is called bayanihan, and it has played an important role in the lives of rural communities as a form of obligated reciprocity consisting of hard labor. So within the informal settlements of Tacloban in the Philippines, shown here, many of the families have come from rural Samar and have practiced these traditions before. About 10 years ago, we were invited to design and build a study center for this community and the NGO called Streetlight. The facilities would provide healthcare and educational support for the children, but also a home for those living on the street. We worked closely with the families through the design and building process of the study center. They later described this process using the Filipino term bayanihan, the principles of which were really strikingly similar to the Norwegian tradition of dugnat. So having built something through bayanihan meant that the study center was not just a building to the community. It had become a symbol of the relationships built in the process and the efforts that parents had made for their children. Strategically, the process of organizing through mutual support meant that after the completion, they had also managed to operate the building through the same methods. The material attributes of the building was derived from how they built their houses, and in the years that followed, they would adapt and modify according to this logic.
But on the 8th of November 2013, Super Typhoon Haiyan, one of the strongest typhoons to ever hit land, destroyed more than 4 million households and claimed thousands of lives. Staff and children of Streetlight survived by climbing onto a nearby roof. You can see that on the image here to the left. From there, they could see the waves caused by the typhoon, flattening the informal settlement and the study center itself. Immediate relief and disaster reconstructions are chaotic moments. Everything has been upturned, and the urgency of the situation fosters quick decisions that in the long term can prove to be inadequate or even damaging. Who makes this decision, for whom, and based on what information are important questions to ask. Often reconstruction efforts emphasize the material attributes of what we spoke about earlier. However, the symbolic and strategic ones are as important, if not even more. The process of working together through Bayanihan before the typhoon provided a platform for the families to come together again after the disaster, to build back their own houses, but also their own lives. Utilizing this platform, a core group was elected to facilitate workshops to also build back the study center, office, and orphanage. In this process, the community deliberated through storytelling, role-playing, drawing, model-making, mapping, and mock-ups. Through the workshop process, we realized that the typhoon left a deep psychological trauma that the community was still dealing with. The focus on the material reconstruction often neglects this trauma. In response to their experience of the typhoon, the community identified two dual concepts of open and light and closed and safe. The heavy concrete volumes were designed to provide refuge during typhoons, while the ventilated light timber structures provide natural ventilation that also allows strong winds to pass through the building. The material attributes of the building were defined by these two concepts. The chosen construction methods were deliberatively simple in order to enable the community to gain ownership of the entire process from design to construction and beyond. To be conscious about the material attributes of a project in the input phase is crucial to ensure that the building fits available resources and skills of the people we work with. Over time, maintenance or possible transformations will be required, and if a calamity occurs, the capacity to respond quickly is there.
So when all put together, the various elements of the building form a cohesive framework that the community can inhabit. So this is the main living room with the orphanage. You can see that the loft space above for the bedrooms and the service spaces located inside the concrete blocks on the ground floor. The large screen doors and windows can be opened to form a naturally ventilated recreational space. The office consists of 3 heavy volumes containing meeting rooms and utility spaces. The shared workspaces are located in the areas in between. And at times, this building also functions as a vocational training center. So the study center has teachers' offices, a music room, a library, a kitchen, and bathrooms in the heavy volumes. And it has classrooms with areas for song, dance, and theater in the spaces in between. As such, this is also the public face of Streetlight, and it's the space that connects them with the larger community of Tagpuro. So through this project, we came to realize that the essence of architecture is not space, but instead it is the meaning ascribed to space. This architecture becomes a part of the community only when it becomes a symbol of the values, knowledge, and relationships built in the process of its creation.
So for the São Paulo Biennale, a group of 11 migrants share their personal and collective stories of invisible borders within their daily lives. By situating one's own experience in relation to others, their stories were translated into symbols and patterns on a series of banners that were installed at strategic metro stations. This one in the bottom left states, "Listen to us, we are here," and was installed at the political center of São Paulo. The symbols express voice, neglect, and the need to be heard. This process was inspired by the Brazilian tradition of mutual support, called mutirão. Traditions of mutual support are historically based on oral exchange of knowledge and experience. Therefore, storytelling can be an important tool to build a shared understanding in the input phase. Storytelling is about sharing one's personal experience and finding something in common with others. Personal and collective storytelling can generate new narratives, goals, and collective actions. To build a collective story can be a challenge. In some cases, people are very aware of their own story, but not how this situation relates to others in their community. Stories need to be told face to face so that this connection between the individual and collective can be found, and a shared understanding can emerge. As each member of the group shared their own story, other members of the group would take on the role of listening or writing. The person writing would try to capture the story in its entirety, make a physical document that the group could revisit later if needed. As is often the case, the person telling the story will struggle to remember later what they said, so this document is useful in that regard. These roles rotate between each member of the team and allow for different perspectives to merge in the process that generate important discussion about what was said and what was heard. From these discussions, a shared story was created within each group, addressing issues such as health, language, social assistance, education, and housing. By translating these stories into symbols and patterns, the stories became not only an account of a situation as it is today, but also a call for change. The creative act of drawing helped the members discover and conceptualize their experiences in ways that made it relatable to other members in the group. Simultaneously, differences and frictions that were hard to reconcile in text were allowed to coexist in the ambiguity of a drawing. It was important that the migrant group that voiced their opinions were also involved in the actual making of the banners. Their messages transformed once we engaged in the making, and once we had created something together, we had a language to communicate ideas and concepts that we couldn't have had by just talking. One important reflection was Nancy's understanding of knowledge and of community, as defined by exclusion or inclusion, something she had experienced herself. Through her painting, she explained that having something in common means that you are on the inside of a group, and if you don't, you are on the outside. These are invisible borders that we draw around ourselves. The outcome of this process generated a strong unity and ownership amongst those involved in the process. So much so that the banners became an important part of the migrant march down Paulista Avenue, calling for legislative change for the rights of migrants in Sao Paulo. The objects we make become collective representation of the ideas, values, and meanings embedded in the process. This requires externalizing one's own thoughts so they can be discussed and processed together with others. This is a collective process of deliberation and beyond storytelling, there are multiple forms of communication that we use to explore these ideas.
So in Vietnam, the tradition of Doi Kong structured our collaboration to design and build a textile cooperative in the village of Lung Tam. Through intensive sessions organized between planting and harvest seasons, the cooperative members mapped their existing facilities and developed a new design for the site, which we then tested through a small prototype. So although space can be illustrated through architectural tools and methods, the way that it functions can be best understood through simpler and more direct methods, such as role-playing, singing, painting, or even storytelling. Each workshop is centered around an activity that explores a particular topic through the creation of output that is presented and deliberated together. Through these alternative forms of communication, we go beyond the constraints of language and allow feelings and ideas to be expressed and discussed more openly and more directly. So similar to our work in Sao Paulo, storytelling can be an important tool to understand how we perceive our situation, both individually and as a collective. In Lung Tam, we shared stories about the spaces where we live and the symbols that are meaningful in Hmong culture. We're able to build a common understanding about the qualities of space we are talking about when we have a clear reference that everyone can relate to. The symbols that were shared have common meanings, that they also make their way into the patterns that they create on the textiles. So mapping is an act of organizing, categorizing, and establishing relationships between different elements of an environment. So we did a series of walkthroughs around the community to draw different house typologies that we found around the village. This allowed us to categorize and analyze them together and find what we could like to capture in the spaces and what we'd like to create for the cooperative. We also mapped out the plan of the existing cooperative to document how the space was used and also to categorize the process, their design process into different zones. This allowed us a way to talk about the relationship of these zones and how they can be configured in a final design. Drawing helps to identify and transform stories and ideas into physical representations that can be documented, discussed, and developed collectively. The plans that were created were discussed, the different floor plans, and the plan options for the building became a common reference for us to improve on the decisions made as a group. The logic of the structural grid in the vernacular wooden houses became a precedent for the way that the cooperative members discussed and drew the new floor plans for the cooperative. Role-playing is a bodily expression of an idea, an issue, or a lived experience. Acting this out or being a spectator offers both an inside and outside view of a given topic. It also gives a sense of scale and can be a great way to understand the size of a room or a space. After drawing floor plans on paper, it became quite clear that we had to test this out in full scale before we actually are able to finalize the design. We used some rope to stake out a plan on an open area near the site and acted out how the space would be used in the equipment, with the equipment that they needed for each function. The result of this role-playing was a lively discussion about how the space could be used. Model making enables the translation of ideas, programs, and concepts into space. While role-playing or mock-ups offer a very concrete experience of the building, a scale model offers a more abstract overview of the project. This allows us to deliberate on the configuration of the various zones and functions within the space, as well as to make a connection between the existing facility and the future facility. The scale model also allowed us a way to discuss building elements and construction systems that relate to their vernacular architecture. Mocking up in full scale helps to translate abstract ideas, drawings, and models into concrete examples. We also built a full-scale window using cardboard so that we could understand the relationship of the working space to the facade in terms of the functionality of the different window configurations. In order to put into practice all the skills we have formed as a group, we built a small shed that serves as a place to showcase their textiles, as well as a space to demonstrate the weaving process, both for the children in the village and also for some tourists who are visiting. This shed mock-up also becomes a reference for us to build upon in order to talk about the tectonics of the final structure that we hope to build together. The design for the new cooperative consists of reused wooden houses kept since the Vietnam War, and these structural members that were brought with them during the forced relocation from the hilltops down to the bottom of the valley. This move has exposed them to landslides and high risks of flash floods, fortunately. And the design therefore carries a symbolic importance to the community, passing down the history of the relocation while also housing the craft that they cherish the most.
For our project in Oslo, we focus on two particular strands of the Norwegian tradition of mutual support, dugnad. That is the dugnad of ideas and the dugnad of construction. As part of a broad popular movement addressing health, litigation, religion, trade unions, and so on, the idea dugnad played the central role in bringing people together to form the Norwegian welfare state. These were grassroots movements organized to discuss and act on pressing issues and challenges of the time. As people were in need of a place to gather, discuss ideas, beliefs, and also politics, it became important to have the facilities needed for these discussions. Some of these buildings, also known as grendehus, were community centers often built through dugnad of construction. Together with the municipality and the residents of Sletteløkka, where the project takes place, we initiated a series of dugnads to program and renovate a vacant space in Sletteløkka into a community center. Exploring the concept of dugnad is important in the context of Norway, where participation and citizen engagement is often reduced to a consultation process where power still lies in the hands of the developer or the politician. Exploring how platforms of mutual support can facilitate this mutual exchange between different stakeholders, we hope to find a way in which urban development can start with the intent of the people rather than the speculative interests of the politician or developer. The challenge we found in organizing dugnad sessions in Oslo every second weekend was to ensure the proper outreach, to engage those that normally do not engage in public deliberation, as well as to ensure that this participation fostered a commitment to come back the following weekend. When new people joined, we also needed to find ways to bring them up to speed on the state of the discourse and making process, without relapsing into an issue that was already discussed and resolved. The act of making object that can be displayed and presented easily by each and everyone that took part in the making of it allows for this process of involving people as they join, as well as to ensure that anyone within the group can take on the role of updating newcomers. This example here is a key used to program the activities of the grendehus, its key programs and its key individuals that will take responsibility for the different programs and their operation. As we moved on to the construction dugnads, the head of the municipality task group and the most active residents would engage in weekly meetings to define, schedule, and delegate the work that had been done. Tasks that went beyond the expertise of the people in the group would be delegated to skilled labor that would be paid to implement the task. In the picture here, you have Maria Orton, which has been a very close partner and collaborator with me and Sudar on this project. Again, the act of translating an idea into a physical intervention can be powerful, and many of the residents explain that they have never known that they could achieve or realize some of the tasks they took on. This building is set to be completed now in October. It's been delayed due to COVID, so that will be a big celebration when it's open. So together with the team of the Japanese Pavilion of the Venice Biennale 2021 and the residents of the northern part of Shettlöka, we are now developing a new meeting space by reusing an old greenhouse in the area and reassembling the Japanese house that's been exhibited for the duration of the Biennale in Venice. So this is very exciting, and we're looking forward to this.
So to address the theme of the Venice Architecture Biennale, how will we live together? We teamed up with a community in Angat, Philippines, that practices bayanihan as part of their way of life. Through this 6-step process, we designed and built a library and a conflict resolution space in response to the need for privacy and security brought by the dense living conditions. So this building is now exhibited in Venice and will return home to the village after the Biennale. So in order to really structure the input phase of a process, we have developed a 6-step method that creates space for this mutual exchange of knowledge. So first, it's about learning about the context, values, and culture that the community shares. Second, we collectively question how we develop these in relation to shared ambitions. Third, it's about making something that suggests how we can transform the current situation. These steps are aimed at creating a concept that can act as a common language within the group. This common language allows us to design and build something together that comes from and belongs to the community. So in a way, we like to see this process as a cycle, since this knowledge becomes part of the community so that they may build upon and develop on this in the future. So the aim of the learning phase was always to reflect on what it means to live together. The values and worldviews important to the community were explored to guide the following discussions. Learning focused on themes of life, of work, and place grounded in people's experiences. So first, learning about each other's ambitions and values by drawing a heart that is filled with what matters to each one. And second, it's about learning about the place by drawing a map of the village itself and the surrounding areas. And third, it's about learning about ways of working together through personal and shared stories of bayanihan. The aim of the questioning phase was to reflect on the challenges that we face together. The situation identified in the learning phase was critically examined for its strengths and weaknesses by personifying the village and acting out the situation. You can see them here acting out a play wherein the typhoon comes and then the community gets to stick together. And you can see also that all these processes are deliberated together with each other. So we imagine the weaknesses as tree trunks also, and the groups identified the root causes and how the problems branched out and impacted their lives. So these reflections form the basis to propose interventions that could address root causes. So the aim of the making phase was to explore ways to work together and do something about our ambitions and problems. The program of the future building was decided upon through interviews within the group as well as the wider community. The mock-up is a scoreboard located adjacent to the basketball court. It was designed and built to test the construction skills within the community and the availability of the materials. The aim of the concept phase was to develop a common language for us to communicate, evaluate, and transform ideas into a design. The common language emerged through the use of the concept of a grid, as well as the Filipino concept of space called Maaliwalas, which means it's a word that describes spaces which are bright, open, well-ventilated, and light. Through workshops, a shared understanding of Maaliwalas was developed by identifying local references and documenting them. The grid was used to move between different scales, budget the size of each program, and draw the spaces needed for the different activities, and as well as to locate them on a site plan. The aim of the design phase was to use the concepts to design the space, the structure, the location of the interiors and exteriors of the building. Placing the buildings on the grid on site, the program locations were adjusted. The structures and roofing in the building were explored through models and full-scale testing. By defining some core parameters such as access, appearance, security, privacy, and ventilation, the final decision on the location and plan of the building were made on the site. The concept of Maaliwalas became the common language which allowed us to design the doors and windows, as well as the roof shape and also how the building meets the ground. The aim of the building phase was to develop the design in detail and to prototype solutions in full scale. These workshops were used as a platform to test and develop different building elements of the library, such as the doors, the windows, and the integrated shelves. Carpenters from the village took the lead and developed this process to measure, cut, and mount the elements with accuracy required for the structure to be disassembled and reassembled in Venice. So this is now the structure as it was before we shipped it to Venice. And you can see also the parts there being laid out on site beside the community. After setting up in Bulacan, we shipped our pavilion to Venice in order to install it for the opening of the 2021 Biennale. We saw the mounting of the pavilion as an opportunity to engage with a different community altogether. So that of the contractors in Venice and also with the Filipino community there. So in a way, the transportation of the pavilion across nations also mirrors the original concept of bayanihan, in that people transfer a building from one place to another through the help of the communities around them. So the library is configured to fit the both contexts of the site in Bulacan and at the Arsenale in Venice. So we thought it was really critical to represent the voices and the effort of the community from the Philippines by bringing the actual piece, the actual product of their work to Venice. We also created this library as a living space where people are invited to contribute stories about mutual support, and it will be displayed in the library as an exhibition inside it.
So the analogy often used in relation to mutual support practices around the world is the idea of lifting something together. In Norway, dugnad is described as a collective lift. In the Philippines, bayanihan is associated with the idea of lifting a house from one village to another. The capitalist exploitation in the early 20th century was also illustrated with the concept of the laboring class lifting the rest of society on their shoulders. It's crucial that we now ask ourselves, what are we lifting and for whom? What values does our architecture represent and promote, and are these worth lifting?
Thank you, Sudar and Alex, for that very empowering, inspiring, and very how can I say this? A very grassroots type of collaboration and design process to our students. Now, do you want to add more in this presentation, Sudar, while we wait for others to type in their questions?
Yeah, well, I think for us, there's also, I mean, just to maybe share a little background also of how we develop these ideas. I think a lot of these ideas have been developed initially as a gut reaction to this tradition where we already do work together in the ways of bayanihan, like when there is a need for it, somehow it naturally happens that people do come together to kind of do something together and collaborate and naturally come together to confront a need that maybe you couldn't really confront alone. So it's in a way something that we found that cuts across also national boundaries, and it's something that's a very human tradition. And through the research that we've done, we've really found that this is something which is more common than we would like to think. Sometimes we feel like maybe bayanihan is a Filipino thing only, but if you abstract the idea of bayanihan and try to see common principles, these common principles do have their parallels in other cultures as well. So in a way, bayanihan is the contextual expression of mutual support, and in Norway it is dugnad. But in our research, we found at least like 40 other traditions, and I'm sure there are more that we even haven't found yet. So it's something that's interesting, that is a very deep topic that's still so much to be explored.
Yeah, and it became very organic during the whole process na everyone's really helping each other, and di ba? Parang yung shared both difference and yung commonalities, parang it inspired everyone to develop the whole design. Ayun. Anyway,
Yeah.
may question na po tayo.
For sure.
I have a question, Miss Erica,
Sige, yes, sir.
to start the ball rolling. Like,
Yeah.
thank you, Sudar. That was really an interesting presentation. My initial question is, for and we were surprised that the diversity of the projects that you guys have already done are really amazing. So my question is, how do you develop certain languages when you talk to a community? Because from the presentation, it seems like you are developing new vocabulary with each interaction, with each community. So that's something exciting for us as architects. And then next to that question is, the main difference of this process compared to an architectural process that we are all accustomed to.
Okay. Yeah, I think those are good questions, and then very deep also. I think the first one has to do with this idea of, like creating that common language. And you're right. In a sense, we are trying to create that common language from the start of the project, or for each project. It really has to be done specific for each project, because in some of these projects we actually don't speak the language that the people do in the communities that we work with. So somehow, you got to find a way to communicate, because that's really the beginning of collaboration. It's impossible to communicate using your English only, let's say, and then our collaborators don't understand English. So, and we don't understand, let's say, in Vietnam, Hmong. So an example is in Vietnam, like where we speak in English with our collaborators there who do speak English, but are Vietnamese. And then our Vietnamese collaborators speak to the community in Vietnamese, but only some members understand Vietnamese, but they really speak Hmong. It's a dialect within the country that they don't even understand each other. So we are like on the third level of this translation path, basically. So we're really not able to communicate so easily. But then through the method of using these drawings, these symbols, these activities, it becomes that way of communicating. It becomes a language that we share. So in that example also, they talked to us about, let's say, their house, and then they were explaining to us the sections of the house in terms of the structural grid. They were saying, this is a 2-grid house, this is a 3-grid house, this is a 5-grid house. Then when we look at the plan, it was related to the module of what they were thinking. They were using grid, but we understood it to be the module of the structural grid that they were using. And that became like the way that we talked about space. So we didn't say 10 meters or something. We didn't specifically use the term module, but they had the word which meant the grid in their language. And that became the way that we discuss space. And that's also the genesis of why we had to draw in the plan to that particular scale, and using that same grid, that it aligns to their understanding of space and their understanding of architecture, basically. So that became a way to communicate. And in the same way, that's also how we were able to find ways of communicating in Tacloban. Let's say the language there was really this idea of boxes and like a roof over it. So the boxes became like these concrete boxes, but initially they were thought of really as sort of like bunkers, in a way, a very strong space that symbolized that strength and that symbolized that stability. Because after the typhoon, they found certain structures within like their area that withstood the typhoon, and that was like a concrete play castle, and that really was the one which they felt like was going to be stable over time. So that became the way that we began talking about this building. So there could be a mix of these very strong reinforced concrete boxes connected by this roof, and then that became the language with which we used to budget space, talk about program, and talk about scale and all of these things. So it was easy for us to talk about it. It's easy also for the community to talk about it. And therefore, that's the beginning of that common language by which we were able to discuss what we wanted to build and how, basically. Oh, sorry. And then there's a second part. No? Like
the second part is like the
big
difference between this process and a usual architectural
Yeah.
project, what do you
Yeah.
think is the big difference between these
Yeah.
kind of projects?
I think when we begin projects, we really start with this idea that it's always coming from a point of empathy, trying to see ourselves from the point of trying to see ourselves within the other members of the community, also through the eyes of the community, and try to see the conditions from their point of view. So we come in always with this idea that we don't know everything. So sometimes, kasi, I think that's the biggest difference. When we're taught about architecture, we feel like we are the experts because that's, you spend years training and you think about it daily and you think about it your whole life. But sometimes the way that we are taught brings us to feel like we have so much knowledge that we could just like give it to the community. But that's a radical misunderstanding of the situation, because I think you then lose the value of what people have to offer in any situation, because we really believe that you know um, there are multiple forms of power, and somehow we feel before that where we're trained to think that our our experience, our training, our expertise is the power that we will use to kind of change the world in a way, or to change the situation somehow. But I think when you engage with the community, you realize that there are multiple forms of knowledge also, and therefore there are multiple forms of this power. And the community intrinsically also has a kind of knowledge and experience and expertise that we don't have. And so therefore we start the process with this idea that we don't know everything, and that the community is there to share with us. So the idea that we want to share different forms of expertise and different kinds of knowledge is really that platform that we try to create, as opposed to it being a one-way transaction between, like, I'm the architect, I know this, I give it to you. It's more like we kind of create a platform where we mutually share knowledge with each other. So community shares with us and we share with them, and then collaboratively we're able to make the decisions together. And it's not in a like romantic sense of togetherness and deciding together. It's really there. Everyone is able to discuss on the same footing. So we're able to have a discourse and have a dialogue and have a deliberation on equal footing. And then there are examples of it. Maybe later we can discuss them through the projects that we've had, where we've also had an opinion, and then it wasn't the opinion that the community agreed with, and they kind of, the opinions the community wanted were the ones that we followed in the end, and they convinced us that we were wrong, actually. So like, it's not a one-way thing at all.
All right. I mean, from as a practitioner, from a person point of view, it feels like it's really an exciting proposition to have a fresh interpretation of architecture every time. A different project would yield a different interpretation of what architecture could be. And it's not like a usual architectural project wherein it's always set. Like if you're always doing residential project, there's always the parameters that you have to play around with. But in this kind of projects, it feels like the definition is always changing on sorts, depending on the community, depending on the interpretation of their typology. So it's really fascinating how you guys navigate in this kind of projects, and it feels like it's really exciting all in terms of approaching this kind of projects.
It is. And I think the exciting part there is really this idea that you don't know what's going to happen. And that was, I think, I don't know if we mentioned it for the Bulacan project. It in the end, it was a library. But when we submitted the proposal to the NCCA, because they're the body that, of course, handles the proposals for each of the commissions for the project for the Biennale. So our commissioners put out an open call, and then we submitted our proposal. In our proposal, though, we said we don't know what we're going to build, and we don't know what it will look like, but we said that we have this process, and if we follow this process, we believe that we can create a good result. So it was really a trust in the process. Like, we just showed them some random renders of what a structure could look like roughly, but it was so far away from what was built, because we didn't know what the program would be at all. We said we have to start with this blank slate and try to go in and learn with the community and see what they need. It's not like we were saying, we need them to build a library. It's more, a result of the process of engaging with the community. That's what was the result. So I think it's a big risk on the part of commissioners, but we were happy that they trusted in the process also to believe that a good process will come out with a good result. And we were happy that we were given the opportunity to explore this on that scale and on that platform. I mean, it's the Biennale, it's a fantastic platform to explore an idea, but it's also very risky because if it sucked, then pahiya yung Pilipinas.
Okay. Thanks, Sir Harvey.
All
Next
right.
question from Sir Concho. Sir, hindi pa yan. In the decision-making process, how are crucial decisions resolved? Is the architect still regarded as the master builder in being the final arbiter in the decision-making? Where are the boundaries drawn in deferring to the different actors in terms of decision-making? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's also related to the question earlier about the biggest difference between this process and the other kinds of processes of architecture. But it's related in the sense that, yes, we see ourselves not as arbiters of the information or decision making, actually. And like I mentioned a while ago, there were some instances where our opinions were not the ones that the community valued. And at the end of the day, also, we changed our mind about the position that being taken. So the limitations for that, I think, have to be about being able to share, being able to decide from a common point of view or from a shared body of knowledge. So the idea that we want to share as much as we can with each other and trying to create that shared understanding together is the platform for making any decision. So if for example, we're deciding on a roof structure or what the shape of the roof will be, as long as people are able to understand the conditions or the concerns or the sort of criteria for making these decisions, people are able to understand that quite easily and able to make their own distinction or decision about what is the best form of the roof, which meets the criteria that they want to meet as well. So when we were, for example, also deciding where to site the buildings within the larger site of the GK community, we came up with a few options, and me and Alex had a preference about where to locate the building because we thought like architecturally makes more sense. It's more interesting and more dynamic in the sense of creating a connection between the community, like the basketball court and like the field on the side. And the community also had like 3 or 4 different options how to locate the building. It's my airplane.
Wala naman sa background. Wala naman ako narinig.
Yeah, wala. Okay, well, I put it on mute. But yeah, so what I was saying, the community also had an idea of where they want to site buildings. And when we went through the deliberation process, the factors that they were considering had to do a lot with security and privacy and having a quiet space for the students to study and a quiet space for people to resolve some conflicts, also like a private space so that when couples are fighting, they would have a place to go and have a discussion that no one else can hear, because the conditions in their houses are quite dense. So people could hear every time someone is fighting, a couple is fighting, and then like the whole neighborhood hears the fight and gets involved in the issue. So they really wanted a space to resolve those conflicts, and at the same time a space for students to study after school, which is far enough from their community that it's quiet and it's private, but also close enough that it's still secure so that the parents can watch over and see what's happening. So the chosen site was not the one that we wanted, because we wanted something that's closer to the community and more dynamic in that sense. But those are not the values that the community had. Those are not the values that they wanted their architecture to embody. So they chose the other site. And at the end of the day, when we realized the justification process of the factors that went into that decision making, Alex and I also felt like, yeah, that's actually the best decision for the site, and not listening to our own biases about where we thought the site could be.
All right, thank you. Next question is from Krisha Amina Pangilinan. Good afternoon po. Thank you for the informative presentation regarding community-based architecture, specifically for projects to be done within remote areas. How do we approach the problem of innovating the design in modern ways without unintentionally alienating its stakeholders?
Well, I guess maybe that's a question back to you. Maybe like, why do you think that there's necessarily a disconnection between innovating modern solutions and alienating stakeholders? I don't think that's necessarily like automatically going to be the case. But I guess, I don't know, like maybe explain muna a little bit more about that question. Why do you think that is the case?
Krisha, do you want to answer or say something or add something to your question? Ayan, wait lang po. Oh, wala siya.
Hello po.
Yeah, hi Christian.
Kasi po, usually po, may question po regarding, like, paano kung hindi maintindihan ng local members of the community yung reason why you're doing this, why you're implementing this element, ganun po.
Yeah, well, in that case, I guess that's the problem is that you're not being able to communicate the conditions which come about parang like it's a matter of justification, or it's a matter of explanation, and a matter of sharing the factors that go into the making of the decision, right? So I think each design decision has to be justified, even from you as an architect to the community that you're working with. And it's not necessarily even just to the community, it's also even to any client, actually, to any kind of any stakeholder in any decision that you need to create. I think it's a matter of rigor, maybe a matter of sharing the information that you have that maybe the people you're talking to don't have. So, but once you're able to share it, hopefully you'll be able to find that way of communicating, which allows them to see these ideas from that point of view. And at the end of the day, they'll be able to question it as well, and maybe change your mind about why you need to not do this sort of design intervention or something. So, I mean, are we talking kasi about like maybe, let's say, parametric form or stuff like that, or
Yes po, yung mga technical innovations po.
Yeah, well, then I think it's a matter of explaining also, like, why is that more valuable than, let's say, the alternatives that are already possible. And I don't think I think people are smart enough that they will be able to understand if you're able to explain it well.
Thank you po.
Okay, next question is from Sir Elwin Benaventura. The library seems to represent the bayanihan concept in the Biennale. How will it be used in the GK community in the long term to encourage bayanihan? Will the materials and assembly be a prototype for the building in the community?
I see. Yeah. Well, the interesting why we collaborated with the GK in the first place was that they do already practice bayanihan as part of their way of life. Like they call the process of building their houses together, right? A form of bayanihan. They out there, let's do bayanihan to build this person's house, and then after they build it through bayanihan also in the next house. And even when they get student volunteers, to come to their sites and help build, it's also kind of framed as bayanihan, which it is. Thinking about it abstractly, it's not literally carrying a house, but it is sharing a load. It is sharing this kind of labor that you're giving to each other, and in the hope of trying to understand that bayanihan is also something which will apply to you in the case when you need it. So it's creating this system of resilience also. And what's interesting is that, yeah, they do bayanihan, and they have an understanding of it. They also use it in the way that they maintain the streets in front of their homes collaboratively. They use it also as a way to do farming together. And in this project, This will be maintained through Bayanihan as well. So the people who will clean the interiors, maintain the furniture, and everything will be done through Bayanihan. And so when it goes back in July, we're having the exhibition opening in July. We'll be constructing the building in June, then opening in July. It becomes part of the community, used as a library and a conflict mediation space. And like I said, we'll maintain through Bayanihan. And the building, the method of building, now that we've shared it, I think a lot of the members of the community feel that they have a better understanding of how things are built, of how things are thought of architecturally also. So in one example, Kuya Joseph, he's a farmer. Before he says, when I build a house, I just, go to my field and then build a house, like build something, build a structure, build a shed. But now after going through this process, he understands that there are relationships that he needs to take into account. Like, let's say, where the wind comes in, where the sun path is, and how it's zoned on site also, and at the same time how it's constructed. So this method of construction that we did using wood is something now that is part of his knowledge. That's something that he can build with also in the future for his other projects. So once you share the knowledge, it becomes part of a community, and it's something that I think is totally open for them to work with and build with in the future. And that's why we feel like this really is a cycle, because once this knowledge becomes part of the community, it's with them forever. And so hopefully that knowledge will be used by them for building whatever structure that comes their way later on. And in some cases, some of them also, because there are a lot of people that want to donate to GK, and then they felt like, at least now when people give us a proposal for a building, we'll be able to critique also. Why is the plan this or that way? Why is the door here? Why is the window here? And how does it relate to other buildings on site? So now this kind of way of thinking is ingrained in them.
Sudar, question na.
Sure.
Gaano katagal yung prosesong ito mula dun sa FGD to, di ba, yung talking to people and yung storytelling, di ba, to...
So, sorry, what did you say? What is the length of the process?
How long is the whole process of from FGD, start FGD to building the library?
FGD, like focus group discussions, what do you mean?
Yung mga usapan niyo, yung simula pa.
Yeah, well, so that's the interesting thing. So, like, for this, it varies also. Where in the particular case for the Bulacan project, it took us 1 full month, whole day, every day for 5 days a week, for a whole month with a group of 20 adults and 10 youth volunteers. So two separate sessions, one for the adults and one for the youth. So twice a day we had workshops, and so that took about a month. And then the construction took another 2 months or so to build the building. But in other cases, because in Vietnam, it was like it took us a year, because almost a year, because we had sessions of like 2 weeks at a time that we spent on site. But then we go home and then sort of like do some processing, and then we had to go back again. It's because it had to fit within their planting seasons also. So we had to work with the time that the community had available. So it varies talaga with how the community is able to fit in this process into their life. What's important also is that we have a commitment to be in this process for the amount of time that is required. Because I think every time you change members, the continuity of the discussions from the first part until the latter parts is critical, because people need to be able to be aware of all the decisions that are being made through this process. So they need to track the logic and track the decisions that are being made throughout the process. Otherwise, just keep going around justifying everything from the start all the time.
All right, thank you. Other questions?
Can I still ask question, Ms. Erica, while we're waiting for the other? when we had Tao Pilipinas from our last webinar, they mentioned that they actually also tried participatory design online but of course it's a
Mhm.
struggle. How about you guys? Have you how do you guys navigate through this situation that we have right now, that we are restricted in terms of gathering, in terms of meeting in person? Did you stop your projects, or
Yeah.
is it still ongoing but now in an online platform?
No, unfortunately, the process that we do require physical presence, and that's a critical part of the process. Like that commitment requires you to be present. Also, the work that we do is very physical. In a sense, we create models, we create drawings, and we present these drawings to each other, and we present the models to each other. Like, you totally lose the sense of scale if you don't have a scale model that you can discuss and hold and sort of create together. So it's really not possible to create these workshops online, or we haven't found a way to do it online. We have done other workshops, but simple drawing workshops, or simple sort of like exercises where we try to find ways of collaborating, but those are specific to for a particular need, but not in terms of creating architectural designs. So we haven't found that way, and I don't think it will be possible to do so. You can't replace it. But what happens in the time when we are forced to collaborate digitally is that we are able to work on different things digitally. So we're able to widen the scope of the communities that we are able to collaborate with. Like let's say the network of the people that we met during the architecture biennale is now a set of people that we are able to engage with through digital means and digital platforms. So this opens up the amount of knowledge that we can access within the world. But then still, when we do get down to creating the projects with communities, we really feel like we have to still be physically present for those things. Oh, si Andrew is raising his hand.
Yeah, Sir Andrew. Puro pa talaga nagtatanong doon.
Si Andrew, nice.
Very interesting. Hi, Sudar. Kamusta na?
Hey, nice to see you, man. You're teaching? Wala.
Oh. I think you should teach as well.
Yeah, why not?
No, yeah, actually, it's. I have a question, but it's more of a commentary on what you guys are doing. Really beautiful work. This is the
Thanks.
first time I've heard about like the whole project in itself. I've heard about the first one that you did when we first met each other a couple of years ago. I imagine, like, I could only imagine how humbling of an experience it could be, especially the way that you described it a while ago. How you had to approach it from a bottom up approach, right?
Mhm.
It's not like you go into it knowing what you want to build right away, diba?
No,
And I appreciate that, because I guess this is what we're trying to teach our students as well. Like, this shows the importance of the process.
Mhm.
You and Alex produced like a very beautiful structure, but in my opinion, you could have produced any kind of structure, and it would still make a lot of sense, because the focus was actually in the process of collecting data from the community and all that. No? So it really doesn't matter what you end up with. No? I guess what I'm trying to say is, you let your research, or you let the community tell you what to do, and it doesn't matter whether it's a library, whether it's a civic center, whether it's a right. So yeah, I really love what you're doing, and I love to see more of it. So just to try and be a little bit controversial, Sudar, no?
Sure. Yeah.
Siguro in line with what Sir Harvey asked you, was there any time during the whole process wherein you thought, F this, it's not gonna work? Just because different sensibilities, diba? Different culture. Like, Filipinos in general, we're known for being hospitable, diba? So, paano ibang cultures? Like, meron bang cultural difference talaga that you felt na parang parang, diba, the whole concept of bayanihan, did you have to jump through more hurdles to come up with a fleshed out project, or was the mutual, or was the bayanihan concept universal regardless of culture?
Yeah, I think it's maybe not bayanihan itself. It is this idea now of mutual support that does find its way through different cultures and different expressions globally. But I guess in some cultures maybe it doesn't exist. I just don't know, or maybe we just haven't found it, because I would imagine like this comes about as a result of our farming origins. Like maybe it's to do with harsh conditions also, and how people had to do it so that they can come together and kind of face the need of, let's say, the harsh climate. Let's say you need to do the farming before the winter comes or something like that. You need to do the harvesting before the winter comes and things like this. Or in our case in the Philippines, it's about earthquakes, it's about typhoons, it's about floods. It's about all of these harsh conditions where people do come together. As of now, in the cultures that we've worked with, we didn't really need to do much explaining to be able to access these traditions together. It's like people understood what it meant when we said, let's say, let's try to use bayanihan, or try to use this idea that we can come together and create something together. In Norway, it's understood already when you say you're doing an idea dugnad. It's automatically, okay, we're coming together, we're sharing ideas. It becomes, in a way, I think this idea of mutual support is...
Oops.
It's okay. Yeah, it becomes a key. It becomes a key to access a way of collaborating with people. When you are able to find that key that makes people understand, like, it puts you in the right frame of mind to be able to work together automatically. So what is the question about any problems maybe, or difficulties? Unfortunately, walang difficulty talaga in terms of, it's fortunate, I guess, but in terms of your question, I don't think there is a moment where I felt like I didn't think it was gonna work. Maybe there are some times when there is a practical issue, like, let's say, okay, one time was when the wood that we ordered, it came to us na parang undersized and damaged and all of this when we were about to build, and so we had to ship the whole wood all the wood orders back, basically, and we had to find a different supplier to build it and get the wood that we needed back on site. But that's not to do with anything about the collaboration itself or mutual support. No, it's more on the practical side of building a project and having a difficulty with sometimes communicating the ideas about, let's say, accuracy or alignment and these things, so which are technical terms maybe, but it's something that once we are able to properly communicate and discuss why these things are valuable, the workers that we're working with are able to understand it quite well, quite easily. Just an example, in Bulacan, everything there, like, we created a pattern on the floor to be able to cut the wood properly. And once people saw that and found a way to understand how to build that way, it was so easy to kind of cut and keep this process going. We didn't have to have so many discussions about how to keep things aligned or how to follow the directions. But before, like I said, they've never built. I mean, everything here was built everything that was built within the community, within the site, within the materials we had from the suppliers nearby. Like, the wood was just within an hour's drive, or even the metal plates was just fabricated in the shop beside the community, and all the workers came from the community itself or the neighboring village. So they've not had experience with building wood in this way. They've had experience maybe in building a roof truss with coco lumber or something like that, or door frames or stuff, but not really heavy timber construction. So this is something that we were able to share with the community, and once we were able to do a mock-up and do an idea, then they got the system already, and it became easy to communicate and build together something that way.
Ayaw mo talaga maglaglag ng community na.
not saying that there were times na nagkainitan. Yeah, of course that happens, but that's normal for any construction project, diba? Like, let's say nahihirapan sila kasi they wanted to use their own tools na yung metro nila na parang 3 meters na lang, and then ayaw bumalik sa thing, or burado na yung measurements. Sabi na, hey, we just need to buy new tools to kind of measure properly. Sabi ay kasi, and then yung T-square nila, yung mga T-square nila na sabi hindi na 90 degrees. No? So those things, like, once we understood, kaya hindi nagtutugma yung measurements nung simula, like some of the measurements weren't right, or some of the angles weren't correct, but it's to do with the lack of tools and the lack of understanding of how to use the tools. Pero once that was settled, madali na, but growing pains, I think.
Sige, thanks, Sudar. Congrats again.
Thanks, man.
Thanks,
All
Sir
right.
Andrew. Last question from Sir Harvey.
Well, last question, Biti naman. I mean,
Sir, actually,
I have another question, Sudar. Like,
Sure, sure.
this one naman, I think might also be interesting for our students. Like, we just taking a step back from this process. I would like, if possible, for you to narrate your position. Like, you were from a traditional firm, Locsin, of course, a prominent firm, and
Yep.
a lot of course, yung Locsin tree produced a lot of important architects through the years, and they're still practicing, and a lot of them are in this traditional mode of practice. And then from you going to this direction, I mean, I'm not saying that it's not traditional, but because it's still architecture at its core, but it's somehow different from what you're used to as an architecture practice. I'm just wondering, what was the process of this sort of divergence from this normal practice, like being from a traditional office?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting in Loxin was, yes, okay, it is a traditional firm in terms of, like, let's say, designing houses, designing, big buildings, creating the, high-rise structures, even performance arts theaters and things like this. But the beautiful thing about being in Loxin is that I think it's a very open platform also, and that the reason for it being what it is that people believe that architecture should also be fun. It should also be something which is pleasurable, in the sense of it being something that you're following your passion. So they strongly believe that architecture and the practice of architecture should be something that you enjoy, and not something that becomes only a job talaga. So when I was in the firm, there was a lot of freedom that was given to all of us to explore different ideas of the practice, how to practice, even how to design. So I look up to a lot of people that are there as mentors. They're the ones. The guy that designed the CCP is still there. He's still the one practicing. So I mean, the architect in charge of the CCP was still there. Like, and it's a very collaborative place to learn also, and a collaborative place to work. So some of the design competitions that the firm has done, and the firm has joined, were done internally also as design competitions. So there is a way there that everyone gets a chance to have their voice heard. And then sometimes the work of the younger generations are the ones to become the entry of the firm. And if the firm wins these competitions, that becomes the built work. So it happened for me also. Like, the design of the new CCP is something that I participated in as a competition, and I led the design for one of the buildings there. And that is the competition entry that won. So, like, I was a young guy then, like maybe just 3 years into practice, and I had that opportunity, and I had that space to get something at least heard, and sort of proposed. And so what I'm saying is that maybe traditionally it is a practice that's doing that way, but the method of practice, I think, is something that is ingrained within the firm already, that I think began the roots of these processes that I've tried to develop also on my own with Alex, that we developed together. So even in the project that we did with Andro for the 2016 Architecture Biennale, it was a very open process. It was rooted in this idea of a democratic process, like everyone's voice should be heard and everyone's voices are valued. And it was done also as a very open discussion. We gave people the space to create their mohons for the Biennale, and everyone presented their work to each other, and there's like an open discussion about how these things could be. And I think that was such a great experience also, in sort of like an exercise in collaborative design. So,
yeah, that was a landmark participation, because that was the first from many years. And Tader Metano actually donated his piece in vinyl, so it's now with CCA, with Sir Jerry Torres. So that's
cool.
Like a sort of full circle. So we are really hoping for more development from you guys. We're really excited about your achievements in this past Biennale, and then hopefully we'll have more exciting participation this next few Biennales, architectural in particular?
Yeah, I'd like to say too, like, okay, it's like the second time I'm participating in it, and well, one is part of Luxin and one is now on my own with Alex. But I'd like to say that for all the students here or the participants, you should submit your entries to join this the Biennale. So follow the page of the NCCA. There's something that is very open process also. It is a very transparent process, and there is a jury that's highly credible and that they see the ideas for what they are. It's a blind process also, so that your identities are, not going to be the factor in the way that you are selected. So please do submit. It's a great, fantastic experience to be heard on a global scale. The experience of joining in a Biennale is really something that I highly recommend. And it allows you to see yourself from a different point of view as well. It's something that you'll learn from and grow from too. And actually, I have to say also a word about the NCCA, that they're such a fantastic group of people to work with, and they're good people in government that really want the best for the country, and they will support you in whatever it is that you want to do. So I mean, just try it and see what happens. They need participants all the time.
All right, thank you. Actually, we a part of like a previous batch actually did participate.
Oh, nice.
Space created by Edson Cabalfin.
So excellent. Yes.
A lot of our students, a group of our students and mentors actually participated in that installation. So it's like we're 3 years in running. So hopefully we're really excited about what's gonna happen for this next installation. So hopefully we may be able to participate again for that next call.
Yeah, open call, for next year. But even as individuals, like yes, institutions are there, but also individually submit a curatorial concept. Don't be afraid. Like some people feel like, say, like nahihirapan sila to create that concept, but I think it's the least of your problems. So just find a way to think of an idea that's interesting and propose it, then see what happens.
Yeah, April ba, Sir Sudar, yung
Yeah, around that time.
Right?
Yeah, around the time that they open the Biennales, around so the time that they give out the open call for the next Biennale.
So may makakapag-isip pa. 2 months.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you again, Sudar.
Thank you.
I really wish Alex was here ka. So we understand the situation. But we really appreciate it, and to show our appreciation, we would like to present the certificate. Next slide yun. To you and to Alex for sharing your invaluable knowledge on structures of mutual support. February 11, 2022 via Zoom. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Sudar and Alex, and we hope to see you very soon also. Face to face, no?
Hope for that too. Thank you very much.
All right. Sir Harvey, I give you again the floor for the closing remarks.
All right. Thank you, Sudar. Sudar will be sending you the certificates through email.
Thanks.
And it was really an enjoyable talk for this afternoon. Hoping some of the students were able to ask questions. Pasensya na if masyado ba ako madaldal that I had a lot of questions, but this topic is really exciting, and I personally feel that this kind of direction in architecture is what we really need, especially after all that we've experienced. And what Sudar and Alex are doing and have been doing in the past few years are a testament to the diversity of practice that we can all go into. I mean, just like Sudar was saying, don't be afraid to participate in open calls like Biennale. I mean, you're not a curator, but just like what he said, it's all about the idea. It's the strength of the idea, and always think about this, even though it's not in the field of architecture strictly, but think about these projects through the process of architecture. That's what's great about our industry or our practice, is that we can actually use that same process to create other strands of art not just the built environment. We can actually create that process. We can actually take that process to create film, painting, and in this case, installation, and also participatory and performative art. So this kind of things are what we are always trying to encourage our students to try to branch out and always not be afraid to try different things. So thank you, Sudar, for sharing your afternoon with us. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us, and hoping that you will be able to join our next webinar this March 18. It would be Triple O by one of our mentors. So that's another sort of exciting development in architecture, convergence of philosophy and architecture, object ontology. So I think, Erica, do we need to take a picture before we end the program?
Actually, two things. First, please don't forget the evaluation form to answer them, guys. We need this to, of course, help us improve the webinars. And yeah, kindly turn on your cameras now for photo documentation. I will be sharing the link of the survey form in the chat box.
All right. Those that were able to come in a bit late, we will be posting this in our YouTube channel so that you can watch the whole presentation. And that's where you can also see some of our previous webinars. So magandang hapon sa mga mentors natin. Thank you for inviting your students.
Sir Noel, dumating Sir Noel. Hi Sir Jim. Sila yung mga hindi ko nakita at nabati kanina. So good afternoon.
So those that can turn on their cameras, please do so. This will be solely for documentation purposes.
So parang medyo nag-shift na tayo, pansin nyo. Naka-OBS na tayo para mas maganda yung mga PowerPoints natin. And with the help of Sir Aldous.
Yes, maraming salamat Sir Aldous.
Live na tayo. And
okay.
Yeah.
Pwede nga,
Right?
I think
Ano kung konti pa lang yung nasa
we can start na para it's 2:30 na, past 2:30 some of us have classes pa siguro.
Alright, smile na lang po lahat. 1, 2, 3. Right, thank you very much again, and we hope to see you on March. Details right exactly.
March 18.
March 18. So, thank you sa mga may klase.
Thank you, Sudar.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Hoping we can revisit this conversation ng medyo mas mahaba pa.
Yeah, sure. Next time. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Susunod kita-kita na tayo. Totoo na.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.